Howdy, partners. Ever wondered what cowboys have to say about life? Well, saddle up because today we're diving into 10 cowboy sayings that'll make you think or laugh. These ain't your average Hallmark greeting card sayings, folks. We're talking about real, raw, trail-tested wisdom passed down from generations of cowboys who've seen it all. From wrangling cattle to dodging tumbleweeds, these cowboys have a knack for summing up life's lessons in a way that'll make you say, well, ain't that the truth? Welcome to Cowboy Chronicles, where we bring you the best of cowboy wisdom and humor. Let's giddy up and get started. Our first cowboy saying is one that'll make you cringe just hearing it. Don't squat with your spurs on. Now you might be thinking, Jimmy, why in tarnation would anyone do that? Well, let me tell you, sometimes in life we get so caught up in what we're doing, we forget to think things through. Kinda like when I agreed to host the Oscars that one time. Let's just say things got a little out of hand. But unlike that Oscars gig, squatting with your spurs on is a recipe for disaster. It's about avoiding things that'll cause you unnecessary pain or trouble. So, the next time you're about to do something risky, remember this cowboy wisdom and ask yourself, am I about to squat with my spurs on? If the answer is yes, maybe rethink your strategy, partner. Now let's mosey on over to our next cowboy saying, always drink upstream from the herd. This one's all about using your noggin and avoiding trouble before it finds you. Think of it like this. You wouldn't want to order a salad at Guy Fieri's Flavortown, right? Same goes for drinking downstream from a herd of cattle. Trust me, it ain't going to be pretty. This saying is all about being smart and thinking ahead. It's about avoiding the metaphorical downstream in life, whether it's bad relationships, risky investments, or that questionable gas station sushi. Remember, folks, life ain't always about being the toughest or the bravest. Sometimes it's about being the smartest and knowing when to steer clear of trouble. Speaking of trouble, let's meet our next cowboy, Tex. Now, Tex is a good old boy, but he ain't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed. He's got a heart of gold and a head full of tumbleweeds, which often leads to some, shall we say, interesting situations. One scorching hot day, Tex and his trusty steed, Buttercup, are parched after a long day of herding cattle. They stumble upon a crystal-clear stream, and Tex, in his infinite wisdom, decides to set up camp right next to the water. Now remember that herd of cattle Tex was herding? Well, they're thirsty too. And guess where they decide to quench their thirst? Yep, right upstream from Tex's campsite. Let's just say Tex spent the rest of that cattle drive wishing he'd paid attention to that whole drink upstream advice. It's a lesson he won't soon forget, and neither will his stomach.
All right, partners, saddle up for saying number 3, and this one's a real knee slapper. Never miss a good chance to shut up. Sometimes silence is golden, especially when you're about to put your foot in your mouth. Picture this. Our cowboy Dusty walks into the saloon after a long day. He starts bragging about outsmarting a herd of longhorns. But Big Pete, the toughest rancher, isn't amused. Let's just say Big Pete didn't shake Dusty's hand. Dusty spent the night picking himself up off the floor. Next time he ordered a tall glass of shut-up with a side of humble pie. Sometimes the best thing you can say is nothing at all. Never miss a good chance to shut up.
Hold your horses, folks, because saying number 4 is a real doozy. Letting the cat out of the bag is a whole lot easier than putting it back. Now, I don't know who first let a cat out of the bag, but I bet they wish they'd kept their darn trap shut. This time, our story takes us to a dusty little town called Calamity Gulch, where the whiskey's strong and the secrets are even stronger. Our hero, let's call him Jeb, is a good old boy with a heart of gold and a mouth that runs like a runaway stagecoach. Now, Jeb's best buddy, Billy Bob, is head over heels for the prettiest little filly in town, Miss Delilah. Problem is, Delilah's daddy, Sheriff Thompson, has got his heart set on her marrying a rich cattle baron from back east. Billy Bob, bless his lovesick soul, confides in Jeb, begging him to keep it under wraps. Jeb, he says, you gotta promise me you won't breathe a word of this to a soul. If the sheriff finds out I'm sweet on Delilah, he'll run me out of town faster than you can say giddy up. Well, Jeb, being the stand-up guy he is, promises to keep his mouth shut tighter than a drum. But you know what they say about good intentions. They pave the road to a whole heap of trouble. See, Jeb's got a weakness for sarsaparilla, and the only place in town that serves it right is Miss Mabel's tea room. Now, Miss Mabel's also happens to be the biggest gossip this side of the Pecos, and she can sniff out a secret faster than a bloodhound on a scent. Jeb, feeling a mite loose-lipped after one too many sarsaparillas. Let's slip about Billy Bob and Delilah. He figures it's harmless, just a little tidbit between friends. But he forgot all about Miss Mabel's knack for turning tidbits into town-wide scandals. Faster than a prairie fire, the news spreads through Calamity Gulch. Sheriff Thompson hears about it while he's polishing his badge. Delilah hears about it while she's trying on wedding veils, and Billy Bob, well, let's just say he's packing his bags and hightailing it out of town before the sheriff can fit him for a new pair of boots. Howdy, partners. For saying number 5, we've got a real head-scratcher, and trust me, this one's happened to the best of us. If you find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. Seems simple enough, right? Yet we all find ourselves digging away at that hole of despair sometimes. This time, our unfortunate cowpoke is named Clyde, and Clyde, bless his heart, is about as sharp as a butter knife in a gunfight. Now, Clyde's in charge of watching over the ranch's prize-winning bull, Brutus, a meaner, ornerier beast you've never met. Well, wouldn't you know it, Clyde leaves the gate unlatched, and Brutus, being the independent sort, decides to take himself for a little stroll. Clyde, panicking like a prairie dog at a hoedown, knows he's in deep. Instead of fessing up to the rancher, Clyde figures he can wrangle Brutus back on his own. He sets off after the bull, armed with nothing but a frayed rope and a whole lot of misplaced confidence. Now Brutus, he's enjoying his newfound freedom. He's traipsing through the tomato gardens, doing a little line dancing in the flower beds, and generally making a nuisance of himself. Clyde, hot on his tail, keeps trying to catch him, but Brutus is quicker than a greased pig at a county fair. Every time Clyde gets close, Brutus gives him the slip, leaving Clyde flat on his back, staring up at the clouds. But Clyde, stubborn as a mule in a mud pit, refuses to admit defeat. He chases Brutus through town, causing chaos and mayhem wherever they go. Finally, after a day of chasing a runaway bull, Clyde collapses in a heap, defeated and covered in more dirt than a prairie dog town. The rancher, who's been watching this whole debacle unfold with a mixture of amusement and exasperation, finally steps in. He calmly walks up to Brutus, slips a rope around his horns, and leads the docile bull back to the ranch. Clyde, watching this, finally realizes the error of his ways. He dug himself into a hole so deep he could barely see the light of day. And the worst part? He could have saved himself a whole lot of trouble if he'd just stopped digging. You know, they say experience is the best teacher, but personally I think experience is just life's way of saying, "Ha, you screwed up again." But hey, at least you learned something, right? This next Cowboy saying is all about that. It goes, good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of that comes from bad judgment. Basically, if you want to be a wise old owl, you've got to be a bit of a knucklehead first. Who knew? So picture this, our cowboy, let's call him Dusty, is fresh out of the saloon and feeling pretty good about himself. He's won a few hands of poker, had a couple too many whiskeys, and he's feeling invincible. He decides to show off his roping skills. Now Dusty's aim isn't exactly what you'd call sharp on a good day, but add whiskey to the mix and it's a recipe for disaster. He swings his lasso, misses the cow by a mile, and takes out the entire front of the general store. Cans of beans, bolts of fabric, even a chamber pot go flying. Needless to say, Dusty learned that day that good judgment comes at a price, usually the price of fixing a whole lot of broken stuff. Life, much like a bucking bronco, can be a real wild ride. Sometimes you're holding on for dear life, wondering when you'll get thrown off. But this next Cowboy saying reminds us that even when things get tough, you gotta keep fighting. It's simple, but powerful. When you get to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on. In other words, when you feel like giving up, dig deep. Find your inner strength and keep going. Now our pal Dusty knows a thing or two about tough times. One scorching summer, he found himself lost in the desert. His canteen was bone dry, his horse was limping, and the vultures were starting to look awfully interested. It would have been easy for Dusty to just lie down and give up. But Dusty, stubborn as a mule, remembered that little saying about tying a knot. He used his last bit of energy to fashion a makeshift shelter from the scorching sun. He bandaged his horse's leg, and he kept moving, one painful step at a time. And you know what? He made it out alive. Because Dusty, despite his earlier mishaps, was a survivor. We've all met them, those folks who are about as flexible as a rusty horseshoe. You can talk till you're blue in the face, but they won't budge an inch. This next cowboy saying is for them. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. It's a simple truth. You can offer someone an opportunity, advice, even a big old glass of common sense, but you can't force them to take it. Dusty, bless his heart, had one of those horses. A big old Appaloosa named Buttercup, who was as stubborn as they come. Now Buttercup loved to eat. Hay, oats, you name it, she'd gobble it down. But water? Nope. Buttercup would rather eat dirt than take a sip from the trough. Dusty tried everything. He held her head over the water, he added apples to the bucket. He even tried whispering sweet nothings in her ear. Don't ask. But Buttercup wouldn't budge. She'd just stare at Dusty with those big, innocent eyes as if to say, "You gonna make me?" In the end, Dusty learned that some battles just aren't worth fighting. He accepted Buttercup's quirks and kept a close eye on her, making sure she got enough moisture from her food. Because sometimes, all you can do is lead the horse to water and hope for the best. Howdy, partners. We're back with more cowboy wisdom, and this one's a real knee slapper. You know how it goes, you see a fella walking into town with a 10-gallon hat and boots that could kick a rattlesnake to death, and you think you got him figured out? Well, this saying reminds us not to judge a book by its cover, or in this case, a cowboy by his kin. Picture this. A new rancher rides into town looking like a cross between John Wayne and a tumbleweed. Now this fella, let's call him Dusty, he's got a reputation. See, his brother Rusty was a real bad egg. Stole cattle, cheated at cards, probably even rustled a few hearts along the way. So everyone in town, they're giving Dusty the side eye. They figure apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? But old Dusty, he just tips his hat politely and goes about his business. He's paying his dues, minding his manners, and even helps old Miss Mabel carry her groceries. Now, one day, a group of those no-good varmints from the next county, they decide to pay our town a little visit. They're looking to start some trouble. Maybe make off with some of our hard-earned cattle. Well, Dusty, he sees what's going on. And you know what he does? He saddles up, grabs his trusty six-shooter, and rides right out to meet those outlaws head-on. Turns out, Dusty might have had a brother who was rotten to the core, but he was raised right by his mama. He single-handedly chased those bandits back to the county line. And let's just say they won't be messing with our town again anytime soon. See, folks, what we learned today is that family ties don't always tell the whole story. Just because someone's related to a scoundrel doesn't mean they're cut from the same cloth. Dusty, he taught us to give every fella a fair shake, no matter their last name. All right, folks. This next saying is near and dear to my heart, mostly because it involves money, and as you know, I love money. This one goes out to all you high rollers out there. You know who you are. You hit the jackpot at the saloon, win big at the rodeo, maybe you even struck gold. Suddenly you're flush with cash, living high on the hog. Well, this cowboy saying reminds us that money, like a wild stallion, can be hard to hold on to. It's easy come, easy go, especially when you're tempted to spend it all on fancy boots and sarsaparilla. Let me tell you a little story about a fella named Tex. Tex, he was a rodeo champion, roping and riding his way to fame and fortune. Now Tex, he was a generous soul, always buying rounds for the house and tipping the saloon owners' kids with gold nuggets. But as quickly as his winnings came, they started disappearing faster than a jackrabbit in a dust storm. Tex, he learned the hard way that money don't grow on cacti. He ended up working odd jobs at the livery stable just to make ends meet. That's when old Tex realized the truth behind this saying. Folding your money and putting it back in your pocket ain't as glamorous as throwing it around like confetti, but it's the surest way to make it last. See, saving your pennies, it's like building yourself a sturdy shelter against the unpredictable storms of life. You never know when you might need a little something to fall back on, whether it's a dry spell, a sick steer, or just a hankering for a new hat. Well, folks, we've reached the end of the trail for today. We've shared some laughs, learned some valuable life lessons, and maybe even picked up a few new sayings to impress our friends. Remember, whether you're a seasoned rancher or a city slicker, these cowboy sayings offer a glimpse into the heart and soul of the Wild West. They remind us to be resourceful, resilient, and always ready for whatever life throws our way. Thanks for watching, partners. If you enjoyed these cowboy sayings, give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more cowboy wisdom and fun. See y'all next time on Cowboy Chronicles.